Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about how I passed the CompTIA Security Plus with no prior experience in IT. A little bit about me. When I say no experience, I mean no experience. I majored in criminal justice in college, and for the past couple years, I had been working in healthcare recruitment. So about 2 years into that, I was interested in pivoting my career, and I wanted to see if I was even interested in the material before I did. I will say before I passed the Security Plus exam, I did pass the CompTIA A Plus exam. But before that, I didn't know anything about computers. The extent of my tech skills was turning the computer off and turning it back on again and praying that it would work. And I certainly had no idea what a router was. So trust me, I was as beginner as you could get. So I wanted to give some advice and some encouragement for anyone who is finding themselves in my shoes and hopefully help you pass the exam like I did. In this video, I'm gonna break down exactly how I studied over 4 months, what materials I used, and what worked for me. So let's get to it. First things first, I knew I needed a solid study plan so that I would have enough time to digest and soak up all of the material before I took the exam. Every weekday, I would set aside 2 hours, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening, and on weekends, I would spend about 4 hours on studying material. During this time, I was working full-time, but I did find that this schedule was manageable for my workload. I ended up taking 4 months to get through all of the material, which I felt was enough time to get through it without feeling rushed. And with anything in life, consistency is key. The more you review the material, the easier it will be during the exam to deduce your answer. Now, I'm not a machine and life happens, and life definitely did happen to me during those 4 months. But I made sure that if I ever missed a day, I didn't go more than 2 days without studying. Also, I would suggest not taking more than 4 months to study the material before you take the exam, just because you want everything to be fresh in your head when you take it. Honestly, compared to the CompTIA A Plus, I felt this exam was easier. There was a lot less material, a lot less ground to cover. However, this does not mean you get to skim through the studying. It's always better to know the exam's exact wording they want you to use rather than trying to guess with common sense during the exam. For resources, I stuck with 4 main ones: the official exam booklet from CompTIA, Professor Messer's playlist on YouTube, RemNote for taking the notes and reviewing the notes, and also a practice exam booklet. For each chapter, I would always read the chapter first, which just included a quick skim of the material. I would read 1 chapter in the morning and review the notes in the evening. I found that this quick skim in the morning really helped before deep diving into my notes later. I use RemNote to take my notes. I really like RemNote because it organizes everything very neatly. Also, when you're taking the notes in RemNote, when you create a definition, it will automatically create a flashcard for you to review later on. Taking these notes allowed me to highlight important concepts and also add pictures to better help my understanding. After I would finish writing all my notes for 1 chapter, I would go to Professor Messer's playlist and find the videos that related to the chapter I just read about. His videos were a great way to reinforce everything I just read. He explains concepts really well and filled in any gaps of knowledge that I had after reading. There were times that I didn't understand something fully, and then after watching Professor Messer, it really allowed me to fully grasp the concept. I felt this was the perfect way to study because I would never move on to a chapter without fully understanding all of the material in it. A lot of the material builds on previous chapters, so it's important to not move on too quickly. About 3 weeks before I had my scheduled exam date, after I finished reading the entire book and reviewing my notes, I started taking practice tests. I found my practice exam booklet on Amazon, which I'll link in the bio below, and it had a ton of practice exam questions for me to work through. Within those 3 weeks, I would schedule myself to take a new practice exam every 3 days. So one day I would take the test, and the next 2 days I would work on reviewing any of the questions I got wrong in that practice exam. Now, when I got a question wrong, I didn't just look in the back of the book to see what the right answer was. Instead, I would really try to understand why I got it wrong and why the correct answer was the correct answer. ChatGPT was great for this. Can't recommend it enough. Passing the exam is not just about memorization. Getting the right answer requires you to fully understand a concept in case they try to throw you with any tricky wording. Sometimes when reviewing a wrong answer, it would lead me down a really long rabbit hole, but it was well worth it. When I was taking the exam and there were questions that were convoluted, I felt pretty confident with the answers I gave because I did take the time to review those wrong questions so thoroughly. To dig deeper into my mistakes on the practice exams, I would write each question out on a notepad. I noticed that writing things out forces me to slow down and better process the material that I'm writing about rather than typing it. I would also highlight any unfamiliar terms or concepts that I may have glossed over during one of the chapters and go back and review it fully during that time. Either I would go back to a chapter or I would search for new videos online of people explaining it a little bit deeper, maybe something that Professor Messer glossed over as well. Finally, for every concept that I didn't understand, I would create a flashcard. This would be different than the flashcards in RemNote because the physical flashcard is something that I would flip through every night before bed. Once I finished the stack, I would allow myself to go to sleep. During the week of the final exam, I switched gears a little bit. I took one last practice test to assess my readiness and then spent the rest of my week reviewing my notes. This last week, I wanted to be more relaxed and not overload my brain. So I really just focused on my weakest areas and made sure I understood those key concepts. At this point, I wasn't learning anything new, just solidifying my knowledge. I would recommend taking the exam in person just because I've read some horror stories online about taking them virtually. In fact, I'm not even sure if they still offer that. I believe it was for COVID. I'm not 100% sure on that. But if you are worried about taking it in person, don't be. It was a completely quiet environment, computer lab situation. They also give you a whiteboard to write down any notes before you start the exam or while you're taking it. Overall, it was really relaxed and I wouldn't worry about it too much. So all in all, that was how I was able to pass the CompTIA Security Plus exam with no prior experience in IT. I will say studying for it was quite time consuming. Over the 4 months I was studying, I really didn't go out too much, but breaking it down into manageable steps that I would just follow every day on schedule made it way less stressful. So if you're starting to study for the CompTIA Security Plus exam, here are my biggest tips. Number 1 is stay consistent. Even if it's just an hour every day, make sure you do it. Number 2 is use multiple resources. Don't just rely on one resource to cover everything. A lot of the times when you're using multiple resources, you'll find that they cover things that the other resource didn't. Number 3 is don't just memorize answers, make sure you understand why they're correct or incorrect. Last tip is take notes actively, write out what you're learning, and make sure to use something like RemNote to help with spaced repetition. If you have any questions about the exam or need some more tips, you can drop a comment below and I will try to get back to it as best as I can. Good luck with your studies and I will see you in the next video. Bye.